Welcome to Unmute Yourself, the podcast. I'm Nancy Medoff, author, speaker, and coach.
And I'm Beth Knaus, creative copywriter and the owner of That's a Spade Copywriting Services. We are done being polite and ready to get real about confidence, boundaries, and self-respect, both personally and in the workplace.
Beth and I first met when we collaborated on the best-selling communication handbook for women, Unmute Yourself and Speak Up to Stand Out. Now we are amplifying our message and taking it on the road with Unmute Yourself, the podcast. Warning, there may be, no, who are we kidding, will be some adult content. We have a bullshit button and we're not afraid to use it.
So buckle up, buttercups, because here we go.
Hi.
Hi, Nance.
Hi, Beth.
How are you? I just haven't seen you in like 5 minutes.
I know. Again, we batch our podcast, so we do a couple at a time. We just finished wrapping up a really good one. So we are warmed up, we are fired up, and we are ready to get authentic.
We are ready to go. Yes, on this concept of authenticity, which I have to say, I think I've gotten a bad rap, not a bad rap, but I've written a lot and spoken out a lot about this word because for a while it was super trendy. Everything was authentic. It was authentic. People used it in their copy. They used it and, how to become your authentic self. And it's like, it's not a costume. It's not like a skill you learn or a hat you put on, right? Authenticity is how do you accept being yourself at your best, flaws and all, as a human, knowing your individual unique purpose, right? And owning that that's who you are, that you to accept all the pieces of your puzzle. Nobody else has the same pieces. And so that's what makes you authentic. And it's not something you do. It's something you are. You don't say, oh, I'm going to become my authentic self. And I guess you could say that, but it's not like saying, oh, I'm going to go from being a representative to a supervisor, right? It's really just about being open to, okay, I'm going to accept I have some flaws, but I'm going to spend more time focusing on what my magic is. What do you think?
I agree. Yes. And as you were talking, I was writing that down because I like it. It's not somewhere you go. You are always authentic. You are always you. So to me, I agree with you. I would add honoring who you are, right? Like you said, accept, which yes, you have to accept and honor. Like I say, step into it. So you don't become authentic. And I would say you can step into who you are. And when you step into who you are, then you are living your truth. To me, that's authenticity. That's what I mean.
Yeah.
Authenticity to me is living your truth, all and everything that comes with it, but
Right.
the good, the bad, and the ugly.
Right.
But it is owning that, stepping into that and owning it.
And for people who don't think they're authentic, because oftentimes you can be in your authenticity, but maybe you have something that's blinding you to it and that makes you insecure about it. And so you don't see it and other people do see it. But I think that we all have places in our life where we learned to not necessarily be authentic, right? And so I grew up as an only child, but I feel like I see it in other people I know who have siblings, right? Where it's like, if I want a certain type of attention, I have to fall in line in this way because this is what other people expect of me. And you do it, but you're not your authentic self because you're falling into this mold that probably no longer serves you and that everyone around you kind of put you in. Or you fit in because everybody else was fitting into theirs. And the second spot I see that is at when you're a mom, especially when you're home with your first kid and it's you and that first kid and it's a huge life-changing thing. you want to be accepted and you want to belong, whether it's at the playground or the mommy and me or the coffee shop or wherever it is, because first time parenting can be isolating. It can really be isolating and you really need to build those relationships. But sometimes there's some people pleasing that goes along with it, right? Because not everybody wants to raise their kid the same way, or not everybody feels the same way about breastfeeding, or not everybody, goes back to their pre-baby weight, or there's all these things. And it's like, I just want to be in this group so I'm not alone. And so I think it's important to ask ourselves, do we put ourselves in group situations where we feel we have to be someone else to belong there, because then you shouldn't be there.
So much to agree with you there. It's yes. What I had written down was many people go through their whole life without stepping into who they are and without being authentic or stepping into really what makes them happy and who they are. There is no judgment. So let me back up. So there's no judgment there. So let's take a Stepford wife. I'm dating myself. So let's take what's a modern example of a Stepford wife? I'm trying to think. I'm watching this show on Hulu, Candy. Have you seen this show? And anyways,
No.
yeah. And it's back in the 70s. So this is great. This because this is what I wanted to talk about. We're not in the 60s anymore, where here is what you were supposed to be as a female or a male, right? Because we have male listeners, and this applies to them as well. If you were the male, you went out, you earned, your life was predictable, you did this, you had the car, you had the 2.3 children, you lived in the ranch house. That's gone and that doesn't exist anymore. So, but think about the people during that time who did what they thought they were supposed to do, but never really lived their truth, never really got to be who they were because they were trying to fit the mold. And that doesn't mean they weren't happy. Maybe they were happy, maybe they were content. But I can tell you firsthand that when you do honor, accept, and step into everything that you are, this doesn't mean you're an asshole. This just means that you are, I know who I am, flaws and all, and I try to work on those flaws. I know I'm not perfect. The minute you step into your truth, your life will change for the better and you will never look back, particularly in your career or in your business. I look at people who, women mostly, who have these businesses that they started, and I can tell after 5 minutes talking to them or being in the room with them, and you probably can too, Beth, that this is not what they want to be doing. This is not who they are. They think they can make money and they have an interest or a skill set in here. So they are monetizing it. And I applaud them for that. I would suggest that if they figured out really what is it that they want to, who are they and what do they want to be doing, that they could be a lot happier, make a lot more money, and live their truth.
Yes, I agree. I agree. You see a lot of people fall into those. I mean, I know personally that I think my parents wanted me to go to 4 years of college, or I know my dad did. And I think I was a great student academically, and they wanted me to do accounting or something like that. And I really didn't want that. I always had like this kind of creative streak, and I ended up going to school. I went to a high school that was also a trade school, and I went to be a hairdresser. And I mean, my mother was mortified that she couldn't tell people I was. Meanwhile, I went out and worked and made more money than she made at the bank she worked in, and that was never, it was like, I like this. This is what I want to do. I don't really care what your friends think. I think I always had a little bit of that. Like, no, I'm not doing that.
So, but it's right. So imagine if you'd worked at the bank or done whatever for 20, 30, 40 years. And
Yeah.
these are the things you see the movies about where people, lose it when they turn 50 or 40 or whatever the case may be. So yes, I just thought of why I'd made that note you asked me about. So this goes back to, so our number one rated podcast is The Happiness Curve. And how you become happier the later you are in life. I think part of that is because later in life, you know what makes you thrive, you know what you want to do, and you have the luxury of being able to do that. When you're in your 20s and your 30s, you're still figuring it out. You
Mhm.
don't necessarily know yet. Like you're trying out different things. You're trying this out. Maybe I like this. But as you get older, and as you get older, that's when you really start to figure out, okay, this is not for me. This is, how do I get to spend more time doing this? And that's where I would ask, if you're younger and you're not loving what you're doing, what are you doing outside of work to figure out what it is you like to do? I know
Right.
that was a very long statement. Or even people that are in their 40s and 50s. If you don't feel that you're being your authentic self, or you don't think that you're living your truth, how are you going to figure out what that is?
Right. Right. How are you going to explore? Because, if you're not living your truth, it's a little soul sucking and exhausting. So you do have to kind of motivate yourself to be like, okay, I just worked at this thing that I don't really think is who I am. I need to spend my other time, you know, finding joy in other things so that I
Mhm.
can figure out what the heck I have to change, right? What do I have to do to find that sweet spot where I can acknowledge my authenticity?
Conforming is exhausting
Yeah, it sure is.
because A, you're pretending, B, it feels icky, and C, you're not you're denying what you're supposed to be doing, or how you're supposed to be living. And once you get clear on it, and again, this isn't about being perfect. This is about doing what you're meant to do and what lights you up. And when you can do that, all this noise no longer matters. So like let's take your career as an example. So by your career, I mean either your business, or if you're working for another company, your career. Once you figure that out and you get to step into that, much less bothers you, much less comes across your radar. I'm not saying that there's no noise, but it doesn't matter the bullshit that goes along with either your peer group or your mastermind or your boss or whatever the case may be. It starts to fall away because you're doing what you love to do. And so it doesn't matter anymore. Is that
Yeah.
clear?
Yes, absolutely. And the thing I want to say that makes me a little crazy about the word authentic and authenticity is that there really is no other word that you can replace it with, right? As a writer, I'm always like, oh, everybody's saying X, I'm going to find a different way to say it. And there's really no other word. The closest word for me is genuine, but it doesn't quite do it. Um, so that's also been the frustrating thing for me when everybody's been saying authentic this, authentic that. And I also feel like if you have to say, I'm being my authentic self, you really shouldn't have to say it, right? It's
Right,
something other people see in you. It's an
right.
energy you give off. Um, so yeah, those are my other comments about ambition, about authenticity.
Do you think you're seeing that word more, or do you think for some reason you're noticing it more?
Um, well, I think it's calming down a little bit. But at first, when it first came around, I think everybody loved it. And there's a reason to love it. It's a fabulous word. It's just, are people using it? But you're right. Then I was like, oh my God, it's everywhere. It's in the refrigerator, it's under the bed. Everywhere is authentic and authenticity. And um, but it obviously shows that people want that. They want that concept of authenticity, and they want to figure out, how do I get it? And I think the answer is you'll know that you have it when you don't have to be pointing it out anymore.
I agree. And as you were saying, people want that. You don't just get it. You have to work for it. You
Mm-hmm.
don't get it. You got to go through a lot of work for that, a lot of self-reflection, a lot of difficult things to hear about yourself, a lot of uncertainty, a lot of soul searching to be able to figure that out. To your point, you can't wake up and just say, well, it's Tuesday and I've decided today I'm going to be my authentic self, because you don't know what it is unless you do the work.
Right. Yeah. And it's not selective like that. Like on some days you have it, and some days you don't. I also think that it requires courage because let's face it, if you're really going to be your authentic self, this is again, spoiler alert, there are people who may not like your authentic self. So what? So what? I mean, you can't everybody is not going to like you. You don't like everybody, right? Do you ever find yourself saying, I really want to like that person. I really want to, there's a couple cool things about them. I really want to like them, but there's something stopping me.
Yeah,
And
I do.
yeah, and it's, whatever. They're not, if they're being authentic and it's not my vibe, it's just not my vibe. It doesn't mean I can't respect them. It doesn't mean I can't be nice to them. It just means that, maybe we're not going to have this strong connection, right? You have to find the people you drive with, and you want those people to be being authentic, and you as well, right?
Yes. I think if you choose to, I think you said it takes courage. I forget what you just said. To take the risk, right? To take the risk because it's a risk. You are 100% vulnerable. When you show up and you say, here's who I am, here's what I'd like to do, here's how I want to live my life. That's like a judgment beacon, right? Like, hey, everybody, please come judge me. What I have found, and this, I'm thinking about a friend of mine who went after his dream, gave everything up to go after his dream. And I so admire him for this. I might get choked up actually. So admire him. And the people who aren't happy for him are jealous. They are envious and they're jealous because he did the work, he took the risk, and now he's living it and he's never been happier.
Mhm.
So, that's a piece too, is maybe you're getting a little bit of flack because they couldn't do it, because they didn't do the work, or they didn't take the chance, or whatever the case may be. So that's what I think about that, Beth.
Right. Well, and I am going to say, the more we do these podcasts, the more you can see that there's overlap. Last week's podcast was about limiting beliefs. And if you want to be authentic, you have to get rid of them. So if you didn't hear the podcast last week, you should check out limiting beliefs because it definitely ties into this, to figuring out how will you be, or how can you feel your authenticity, right? How can you live it and embody it?
And figure it out, right? Like
Yeah,
that's,
figure it out.
yeah, yeah. You said something about people judging you, or people not liking you, or not liking what what you're doing. I also think it goes back to, who are you surrounding yourself with? And that goes back to your tribe, which I think we talked about last 2 weeks ago. Um, we have a podcast episode called Find Your Tribe. Anyway, it's, as you start to step into who you are, you will lose people along the way.
Mm,
That is okay. They weren't your people.
right.
They liked and gravitated towards who you were in the box, the mold. They wanted that person, not the one that you came out to be. I'll tell you, it's okay, because you will never, ever, ever look back, ever, ever.
Not one time.
Not one time. Not one time. Um, what else do we have? Oh, so any takeaways?
Hmm.
I have one if you're thinking.
Okay, go ahead.
Um, so this is actually in the book, but of course we would like you to buy the book. But if you don't want to buy the book, there is this is for people who are trying to figure out career wise. This is only career, and career is only 10-20% of who you are, whatever that number is for you. It's called the High Five Test. And if you go to high and the number 5test.com, there's a free version and there's a paid version. And the paid version gives you 30. The free version, I think, gives you like 8 or 7. And you answer a series of questions. It'll take you about 20 minutes, and it gives you back your core strengths, and your strengths are what you love to do. because you love to do it. You keep doing it because you keep doing it. You get better at it. This book and this test changed my life 20 years ago, changed my life again a few years ago. Strongly recommend. I will put a link in the show notes. It's called the High Five, HIGH 5 test.com. And that will help you get closer to, how do I thrive? What should I be doing? And that is one step to take to get closer to living that kind of life.
Yeah, I love that. I've taken a bunch of different tests because I like to see what they all say, because some of them are more personality heavy and some of them are skill heavy and that sort of thing. And yeah, I want to add that one to my, because then when you have these things, you can, ask yourself, if you're feeling off, am I living in my strengths? Am I living in my positive qualities and personality characteristics? You can look at the list and say, I didn't do that today. I didn't really use that as my guide today, right? Because, we all have days where we buckle in some way, or we think the easy way out is just going to be this or whatever. So it's just a nice reminder.
Yeah, and it'll validate if you're not happy at work and you take that test, and what your top 5 strengths, narrow it down to 5, your top 5 strengths are not how you're spending most of your days, and it's time to find a job where that's what you're doing. That's a lot of, that's part of the, I'd be interested to see what yours say.
To see
what your top 5 are. Yeah.
All right. I'll take
okay.
5.
And then if you combine it with last week's episode, Beth had a really great example of a journal prompt of what is possible. If you take the 5 strengths and right after that, you just start writing down or dictating, I dictate now, what is possible based on those 5 strengths, what's possible. That's huge.
Yeah. How do you use those strengths to achieve what's possible?
Exactly.
Yeah, I love that. I love that.
Yep.
Because I like that with values too, when I work with clients on their messaging. You have values, but what are you using to implement those values? You're using your strengths. So
and also, if you do this, Podsters, let us know. I'd love to know. I love this. This is what I love to do. I would love to know what strengths came up. I'd love to know about the journaling. I know Beth would as well. So hit us up on Insta or LinkedIn. Let us know. Leave a note or leave a comment or leave a review in the Apple Podcasts, and let us know what you learned or what you found out. We would love to know all of this, because we hear from people, but we don't hear from people enough, because we love to hear from people all day long. So let us know.
All right.
Great. That's it for now.
That's right. Everybody go out into the world and exist as your authentic self.
Namaste. Right?
Namaste. Namaste, Nancy.
Namaste away from people who aren't authentic. That's what I'm going to do.
That's right.
Okay. Okay, bye.
Bye.
That's a wrap on another episode of Unmute Yourself, the podcast. We hope you found value in today's podcast. We hope you were able to take a little time for yourself and perhaps think about how you're showing up.
And thank you for all of the great feedback we've been receiving. We'd love to hear more from you about what you think, the tactics you're using every day to speak up, and anything else you'd like to hear about on future episodes of Unmute Yourself, the podcast. You can contact us through our websites. Nancy can be found at nancymedoff.com, and Beth can be found at that'saspade.com. Or you can email us at unmuteyourselfthepodcast, all one word, @gmail.com.
We will see you next week, and until then, keep speaking up.